Hey homies, what's up? Today we'll be covering everything you need to know about the Goblin Army. We're gonna go over spawning, enemies, loot, and any other related facts. Let's get straight into it. Firstly, the Goblin Army is a pretty hard mode invasion that usually is the first invasion that every player encounters. It can be summoned using the Goblin Battle Standard, made from 5 tattered cloth dropped from Goblin Scouts, which are rare and only spawn on the right and left thirds of the world. The player must have at least 200 health to use it, otherwise nothing will happen. Despite this, the first time you encounter a Goblin Army will most likely be automatically through random chance, especially for new players. If all criteria are met and no Goblin Army has spawned before in the world, there is a 1/3 chance every morning they will invade. After the first invasion ends, there is a 1/30th chance in pre-hard mode and a 1/60th chance in hard mode that it will spawn every morning of each day. The criteria for a Goblin Army to happen are the following. It must be morning, 4:30 AM specifically, at least one Shadow Orb or Crimson Heart must have been destroyed, and the player must have at least 200 health. Let's move on to enemies. Based on whether or not you're in hard mode, there will be different enemies. In pre-hard mode, there are Goblin Peons, which are able to break doors, Sorcerers, which teleport and shoot orbs that move through blocks, Thieves, which are very fast, Warriors, which are slow but tanky, and Archers, which are slow but ranged. Most of the enemies will be Warriors, about half, and the rest will be a mix of the rest. The ones you need to watch out most for are Archers, since they do high amounts of damage from far away distances. It's easy to get distracted while fighting the tanky and quick ground troops. Peons, Thieves, and Warriors are pretty easy. For Sorcerers, you may be thinking that they're harder than Archers because they teleport and throw magic damage orbs that can move through blocks. However, the orbs are very slow and can be broken by a single hit of any weapon. Sorcerers are also very low health. To be honest, they're just as easy as the rest of the ground troops, just a little more annoying. In hard mode, the Goblin Warlock also spawns and is also like a mini-boss. She has tons of health, flies around quickly, and casts Shadow Flame apparitions, which are immune to knockback and can easily overwhelm you if you're not careful. On the good side, she drops a lot of good loot, which I'll talk about next. In terms of loot, the pre-hard mode Goblin enemies don't drop too much. The only two drops that are useful are the Harpoon and Spiky Balls. The Harpoon is not very powerful, but can help early on when dealing with a line of enemies because of its piercing. Spiky Balls are a little bit more useful. If you haven't beaten King Slime yet, they can help deal a lot of damage over time if you throw them on the ground. Throwing them causes them to pierce through 5 enemies and break when they hit the 6th, making it useful for large amounts of groups of enemies. If you can find a use for them, don't worry. One Spiky Ball sells for 16 copper, making them a good source of money early on. On average, you will receive around 150 or more Spiky Balls per invasion. Selling them all would give you about 2 gold. Moving on to the more interesting loot, the hard mode only Goblin Warlock enemy spawns 3 amazing themed items for each class except Summoner. The first is the Shadow Flame Hex Doll, which is a close-range magic weapon that shoots out purple tentacles that inflict the Shadow Flame debuff. This weapon is great for mages to use against crowds of enemies and even the Destroyer, since it can quickly be used to fire out up to 9 tentacles at once and hit multiple parts of the boss. The biggest downside of this weapon is that it is close to medium range and requires the player to get close to the target. The second weapon is a Shadow Flame Knife, which I personally think is my favorite, because of the awesome ricochet and animation. Similar to the magic dagger and throwing knives, it shoots out consecutive and accurate Shadow Flame knives at the cursor. Contrary to what you may think, it's actually a melee weapon and can be used infinitely. Every hit inflicts a Shadow Flame debuff, and hitting one enemy causes the knife to ricochet and bounce onto another enemy possibly. Just like the Shadow Flame Hex Doll, this weapon is great for crowds and can help melee users against the Destroyer in hard mode, since it hits multiple parts and inflicts Shadow Flame. The last possible weapon dropped from the Warlock is the Shadow Flame Bow. As the name suggests, the bow turns any arrow into Shadow Flame arrows, which inflict the Shadow Flame debuff on impact. They pierce up to 2 enemies and don't have a strong arc, meaning the arrows don't get affected by gravity that much. Since the bows turn any arrow into Shadow Flame arrows, the best arrows to use with the bow are either Cursed or Venom because of their high base damage. Each of these 3 items has a 33.33% chance to drop in Master and Expert mode, while a 16.7% chance in normal mode. Defeating a Goblin army for the first time will also cause the player to be able to find the Goblin Tinkerer in the Cavern's lair. As notorious as he may be for stealing your money, he's still one of the best NPCs in the game, since he allows you to reforge any weapon or accessory as well as buy the rocket boots needed for Terra Spark boosts later, and Tinkerer's Workshop, an essential crafting station.
Stop it. Get some.
He will initially appear as a bound goblin until you speak to him in the caverns. If there is a vacant housing, he will move in. And that's it. Let me know if you enjoyed this video by dropping a like and subscribing if you haven't already. Make sure to comment down below what videos you guys want to see next, and see you guys next time.